This Women Over 70 podcast is sponsored by Vesta, a woman-owned kitchen and bath design firm in Chicago. Award-winning founder Colette Rodon-Hornoff and her team offer a collaborative and detail-oriented approach that turns your vision into a space you will love. Through design, measurement, and construction, you can count on Vesta to bring your dreams to reality. Visit Vesta online at vestachicago.com or call 773-252-7300. Let Vesta infuse your home with warmth and welcome.
Hello, I'm Catherine.
And I'm Gail, and welcome to Women Over 70, Aging Reimagined, our award-winning weekly podcast. We're excited to be in our fourth year. This has been a labor of love that now needs your support. We urge you to join Aging Reimagined Circle, our sustaining membership fund, or make a donation so we may continue to inspire women to age with purpose, resilience, and self-care. Visit our website, womenover70.com, and join today.
And you can see how excited I am to introduce Barbara McAfee. She, as an advocate for women aging, she's referred to us by one of our guests, Sally Strossel. So welcome, Barbara. And I want to introduce you to our audience. So Barbara from St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin, has decades of experience midwifing voices. As a voice coach, Barbara encourages women of all ages, her oldest client is 89, to find their voices, whatever that means to them. Barbara is passionate about helping aging women, as she says, come into their voices, to express their authentic selves and cast aside repressions. Through her singing keynotes, Barbara explores themes of leadership, meaning, voice, and community for various professions, including training, healthcare, law, education, industry, and nonprofits. Barbara is also a singer-songwriter with 8 CDs, mostly original music, that tap into jazz, gospel, and folk roots. In 2007, Barbara founded the Morning Star Singers, a volunteer choir that sings for people facing illness, end of life, depression, or grief. She's author of Full Voice, The Art and Practice of Vocal Presence, and she trains other voice coaches. So welcome, Barbara. We are so excited to talk with you today.
Yes, I'm thrilled to be here.
So yes. Music, voice seems to be the essence of your life.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about your background in voice.
Well, it has been such a long and winding road. It's long on lived experience and short on formal credentials.
So Barbara, voice seems to be the essence of your life's work, and give us a bit of background about your passion for voice.
Well, it is founded in not having it for a really long time as a growing up person. I did sing in good choirs. I had lots of encouragement, but there was also a lot of things that were, like many of us, trauma, family story, culture. I grew up in Minnesota where you're supposed to be seen and not heard, and that was sort of the culture of my family as well. And then I also just had a lot of neurosis and perfectionism around having to do anything I do absolutely perfectly. And so there was a lot of healing that happened along the way with having my tonsils out and then starting to sing solo jazz in public for the first time. That's interesting. And started writing music after my father died in my arms when I was 31. That's interesting. So there's been this kind of connection of lived experience and healing, and then meeting some very powerful teachers along the way. My primary teachers have been from the Roy Hart Center in the south of France, and their premise is that they work with the full range of the human voice, not just speaking, not just singing, but like out here in sound. And that really set me free. I found them in my late 20s. And I am now.
And you were there in France, studying with them in France?
I did go there. They originally came to the Twin Cities in the late 80s, and I went shaking in my boots to a workshop there and was going to leave if they were mean to me. I was so scared. And in that first workshop, they broke wide open my story about my voice and thus who I am. And I saw the connection that first weekend between our story about who we think we are and then the truth, which is way outside that. And they took me on a great adventure, and no one had ever asked me for all the sound I had, way, way low and way, way. I made sound way up here at the top of the piano, and it ripped my life wide open. And so that's been kind of the taproot of my work. And then I've integrated principles of yoga, Jungian psychology. I was a business person for 12 years as an organizational consultant. So there's a bunch of stuff around leadership and teamwork and all cooked in there.
Wow.
So wow, tell us about what happens to women's voices as we age, and kind of what you do I mean, maybe I should have my tonsils out. That might help.
Yeah, you don't have to do that. Well, everything, our voice is our body, and our body is our voice. So all the things that happen, things loosen, things dry out, things give way, things get floppier and heavier, and all the things. So and then there's the hormonal shift, which is huge for a lot of us. And what we used to be able to do without thinking in our 30s with our voices is now gone. So I think voices can atrophy in a way because we don't ask much of them sometimes. If people stop singing, if they sang, they stopped singing because they don't sound like they did when they were 30. And instead of trying to figure out, well, how do I sing with the voice I have now? It's kind of like how we treat our bodies. It's like, I was just at the pool before this recording, and I was talking to my friend Anne, who's one of you. She's one of the women in her 70s. And we were talking about how much we both have enjoyed going to the bathroom in the woods. I live out in the country. And she said, oh, I miss doing that. My knees just can't do that anymore. And so there's things that we can't do anymore, but there's a lot of things that are possible if we just shift and adjust our expectations. And then there's also sneaky tricks.
There's what tricks?
Sneaky tricks that we can use to help stabilize our voice and find new sound than when we just had young, springy voices.
Can you give us an example?
Oh, yes.
With your own voice?
Yes. So one of the common things that happens is that the higher ranges go away because everything falls with age, right? And so, and then sometimes there's a lack of stability in the throat. There's sometimes a quaver or a waver. And so I use the elements of earth, fire, water, metal, and air to describe different qualities of voice. And for a lot of women, I have them use a little bit more metal because it uses your nose. So it's also really good for those friends of yours who really should have a hearing aid, but they don't. I used to use this with my dear mom as a caregiver when she'd lose a hearing aid. And so if I just pop your sound more through your nose, it carries better. So if your voice gets tired, if you're in a loud place, or if you're with that friend and your voice tires out, this is a way to get more sound for a little bit of breath.
How do you do that, Barbara? How do you make it go through your nose more?
Well, I like to take it way beyond what you would normally do and then work it back from there. So I usually encourage people to be irritable Siamese cats to open up their metal. So you can kind of get that, or a little car. So you can get the feeling of where that is, and then get used to the feeling, and then back it off into something that feels more reasonable.
I'm going to practice that.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, we should practice together.
Yeah.
Yes, the Cat Sisters. That would be fun.
Yeah. That's great.
Mentioned about when you were studying in France that it was voice beyond, it was sound and other things. So talk a little bit about the ways in which women's voices tend to get silenced And then how do you break that open? Help them break that open?
Well, as you all know, you and all your listeners know, we didn't make this up. This didn't just start. I knew my grandmother quite well. She died when I was 17. And she was 20 years old when women got the vote in this country.
Mhm.
That was 5 seconds ago, right? That has everything to do with our voices. And our sisters in Iran and Afghanistan right now, and our Native American sisters, the murdered and missing Indigenous women all over the continent here, it is constant, the suppression of women's voices, pay inequity, the fact that there are many fewer women in positions of power in the government and corporations and other positions. That all affects our voice. That's not just personal. And I see so many women taking it personally, like, what's wrong with me? That was what I was talking about. Why am I so afraid of expressing myself? And it's like, oh, we all come from generations of repressed women. And we may have exceptions. I have exceptions back in my history. But by and large, we're standing in front of a long, long, long history there. And that lives in our bodies and it lives in our voices. So that is the kind of transpersonal version. But then there's personal trauma. There's growing up at a time, and I think I'm 63, so I had that part of the culture, the hangover of the 50s of, being nice and sweet and skinny, and I had, honestly, ladies, I'm 6'2". I never had a shot at that. Being that kind of girl, right? And so there's a lot of, if you're asked to keep secrets in your family, various kinds of abuse, there's just a lot of girdles that get put on women's voices, and let's not wear them anymore.
Right.
Right.
That makes so much sense. It
So
really does.
go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying that it makes so much sense that all of these repressions and silences that we experience growing up as women then affect our voice and how we're heard and how we speak out, and even the tone and the level of our voices.
Yes.
So how does singing help that?
Well, singing can be great. I mean, I love to sing. I like to start with sound, though, because so many people are also wounded about singing. It's reserved for the people who have talent or perfect pitch or fill in the blank. And I can't tell you, after 30 years of doing this work, when I used to work more in person, I would go through so many tissues because you ask people, tell me your story about your voice. I love that question. Tell me your story about your voice. If your listeners want a really fun writing prompt, that's a good one. Or a coffee prompt. Take your friends out and sit down and have that conversation, because there's always a story. And often it is a heartbreaking story about some teacher when you were 9 telling you to mouth the words in the choir, or fill in the blank. I'm sorry, she was wrong, they were wrong, he was wrong. Yeah. So sound is a great place to start, because you don't need to be particularly talented. I do love getting ordinary people singing for the joy of it, without paper and needing to perform or anything. That's a big part of my mission in the world too. But the sounds that we make as humans are a little bit freer than songs. So if you wake up in the morning, that's the earth voice. A yawn. And if you hit your thumb with a hammer or stub your toe, ow, that's fire. Or if you're like a little choked up or a little sad, or when you're comforting someone, that's water. Oh, honey. Oh, I'm so sorry. That's what you use with your grandkids if you've got them. I already talked about metal as being the voice for amplification, and air is so good for like getting at wonder and amazement and inspiration. So I like to start with setting people free
Nice.
to make the sounds of their life without always having to cram them into the structure of words or even a song. After you open it all up, then I like to give people songs that make them happy and tell people to make an irresistible playlist that every time you get in your car or you're cleaning your bathroom or whatever, whenever you have music in your life, to have songs that feel good in your voice, not Ave Maria, unless you're that kind of Ave Maria kind of person. But just songs, just to get your voice more exercised. It's like yoga for your voice, right? You stretch off, and so you have a belty song and a tender lullaby, and then you have a bluesy song. And that is like, that will get you to move your voice around to different areas than you would normally do. Because most of us talk in a teeny, teeny, tiny little range. And we have a lot more available.
So this is so encouraging.
Good. That's
Very encouraging.
I
would love to. So I'm so curious about the group you founded, the Morning Star Singers.
Yeah.
Because obviously we and our audience seem to know a lot about loss and grief and all of those things. So tell us about that, about your choir.
It's the best work I do, and I do a lot of really good work. But it is such a grounding in everything else I do. I don't do keynotes anymore without talking about death and dying, because it has so informed how I live my life. To have my father die in my arms when I was 31 years old was like, oh, this is supposed to be scary. And in that case, it was actually very beautiful. It was intense, but it was beautiful. And I have had the privilege of being in a community that has experienced a lot of loss, and of people of all ages, 52, 93, 81, 17, 18, at birth, 26, and all of the same people were there, and we sang our way through it. And every time the next impossibly difficult thing would come up, there would be the same people, and we'd sing the songs, and we would remember, oh, we got through this before. When we were singing these songs, we got through this before, and we will get through this again. And so all of those years of that experience in my community, I kept saying, one of these days, when I'm done chasing around the world, I'm going to found a little choir. I'd heard of this kind of choir before, and then I finally decided not to wait and just to do it. And so we are a group of volunteer singers. Some of us are trained, many of us are not formally trained. And we go out in groups. We're just going to start again, going out in groups of 4 or 5 people to sing for people at the bedside or on their couch. And we have a collection of songs that are from particular traditions, but also transcend traditions. And I've written a number of songs, and so have other members of the group, songs of comfort.
And so people call you, they ask you to come?
Yes.
Because our audience, we have people who live all across the country and in other countries, actually. If one of us needed your group, would you be able to do it on Zoom, or does it have to be in person?
What's really sad is that singing together on Zoom doesn't
It's
work
pretty hard,
because it doesn't sync up. The
Right.
time's all off. We've been continuing to meet through the pandemic on Zoom because we are a community after 15 years. We actually just lost our first 2 members in 15 years, which is amazing. 2 of them just died within a month of each other, including one of our stalwart people who has just been with us almost the whole time. And so we've been meeting on Zoom, and everybody else is on mute, and one person is leading the song. However, I would suggest that there is a whole network of these choirs. If they look up Threshold Choir, if they Google Threshold Choir, they are all over the place. And there's a network of them. We are not a member of that network because I at the time we started, I really didn't need it. I knew I'd been a songwriter. I already knew a bunch of songs, and so I'm friends with the founder. We're dear friends, but I didn't need to be a part of that. But yeah, and then we also have a CD that has we made somewhere along the line that has a bunch of our music, and that I think you can find that on iTunes and the usual places. Morningstar Singers.
And you have your own CDs of mostly original music. Give us a little flavor of those, or what would we find when we look you up on your website?
Well, there's a bunch of really fun music videos I've been making over time with various friends of these music videos. One of them is they range from hilarious. There's one called Brain Rats, which is about all the junk that runs around in our head. I'll give you a flavor. Brain rats, I've got brain rats, a pestilential blight upon my mind. And then Brain Rats, and goes on to describe, all the junk. I'll run out of money. My mother doesn't love me. I'm a fake. All that stuff. So a young friend of mine, he was 15 when he actually made that video, and it's first rate. And then there's a number of other videos that are quite fun. And they're all over the place. I mean, my first singing gig was jazz. I grew up with the great songwriters of Carole King and John Denver and James Taylor and the Beatles and Motown. And I'm just like, I grew up at the very best time. May I just say, we had the best music ever. And my brother is 10 years older than I am, and the other is 7 years older. So I feel like I grew up more in your generation than in mine, because of having older brothers and that cultural influence. So some of my songs are very tender. Sorry, that's my neighbor. I have these guys that like to drive up my hill in their very loud trucks. So apologies for that. They need, if they could sing, they wouldn't need the loud truck. But
they would need the metallic voice.
Yes,
sure.
yes.
So I want to hear about a book.
Yeah.
Your book.
What a surprise. Yes, it's called Full Voice, The Art and Practice of Vocal Presence. And my publisher is the best publisher in the world. It's Barrett Kohler out of California. And I was a poet for a long time, and then I became a songwriter. And someone in Atlanta saw me presenting on Full Voice, the 5 elements. And she is a Barrett Kohler author, and I came home from that trip. I didn't even meet her. She ran off, had to go do something. I came home from an email from Barrett Kohler saying, one of our authors suggested that you might be a good author for us. And I was like, what? I'm a good writer, but okay, sure. I think my whole strategic plan for my whole life has been, what the hell?
Why not?
What the hell? So I said, what the hell? And I wrote a book proposal. And it also didn't hurt that I actually toured with 2 of their rock star authors, Peter Block and Margaret Wheatley, who are dear friends of mine. And we co-keynoted. I did a women's leadership revival tour with Meg for, I can't remember, I think it was 13 cities over a number of years. And to sort of wake up women's leadership in the US and Canada. And so I think the fact that they thought I was cool, and Peter wrote the foreword for it. So I think that helped my book come into their catalog. And it was utterly ecstatic to write that book, especially the rewrite. It was so fun. Who knew?
What are the 5 elements?
Earth, fire, water, matter, and air.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, this is wonderful. So could you what nourishes your singing soul? What keeps you moving with that? And maybe you could give us an example of sing something, play something, sing something for us.
I'd love to. I have to say, I get nourishment from so many places. I mean, meeting people like you all, and and then all your audience as well. I can hear and feel you all out there listening in your whatever you're in your chairs. I don't know, with your tea and your cat. I don't know. I just get the privilege of meeting so many people all over the world, and now my students who are carrying my work are now becoming much more international. Thank you, COVID-19. So I get very inspired by all the people that I get to connect with, and then nature. I live in a beautiful valley with a wild and scenic river, and go hiking every day and see the natural world being that more than human world is the source of so much joy for me. And then I have people say things to me. Sometimes I write songs based on great poets. I've written songs based on Galway Kinnell and Wendell Berry and Mary Oliver and Rumi and Elizabeth Bishop. So I love collaborating with the great wisdom of other people who might not even be living anymore. And then I have these friends, wise friends, who say things like my friend Juanita in Cincinnati, who once I was talking to her, I said, "Oh, that sounds a little hard." She described a difficult situation. And she said, "It's all right. I can handle it. I'm a grown-ass woman." And I went, "Can I write that song?" And she said, "By all means." So I'll give you a little taste of that.
Oh, good.
And I find when I'm doing this in live groups, I always encourage. I know there are always women in the audience who've always wanted to be like the bad girl backup singers, and so they come on up and they're like throwing their hair around and being backup singers. So this is a little bit of Grown Ass Woman. No longer young, not yet old, well acquainted with the promptings of my soul. I am free from the need for approval. Beautifully shameless to be a grown-ass woman. Grown-ass woman. Grown-ass woman, that's such a fine thing to be. There's a little taste of that. And
That could be our theme song for women over 70.
you have my
Yes.
absolute blessing. And there's more verses too about being like looking at
wonderful.
pictures of when I was young and I was so cute, but I felt like just like I was a hot mess. I love being older. Let me just say, I love being older. Yeah.
In the couple of minutes we have left, Barbara, any advice, any last words you want to leave to our listeners, our audience?
Well, I love the idea of being shameless. And I don't mean inappropriate, although I don't mind that. Sometimes that can be healing as well, to get outside of appropriate. And also, if you say that word a different way, appropriate, it means to steal. I'm just saying. Right?
Yes.
So what appropriateness is appropriating our human spirit, our vitality, our joy, our exuberance, our full life. And so I love to cultivate the idea of what would it feel like to live shamelessly alive until I'm dead. And then who knows? I'm talking to a friend of mine who's in her 90s, who's actually cultivating her approaching death as a grand adventure. And which, so I guess that's it. I think there's so many ways that we're trying to behave, and maybe we should misbehave a little bit more.
Good idea.
Yeah.
I love it.
I love it too.
Good idea.
Oh, Barbara, thank you so much. This is the most enjoyable, encouraging. So thank you. This is wonderful.
Just thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. And I also, if people would like the gift of that song, I know you're going to have with the show notes my website, my information. Feel free to send me an email and say, I heard you on Women Over 70. I will send you the song of Grown Ass Women so you can dance to that shamelessly in your house.
Thank you. I love it.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. And listeners, at the beginning of the podcast, we invited you to join Aging Reimagined Circle, our sustaining membership fund. And Aging Reimagined Circle hosts our monthly interactive programs. And we hope you will engage in these probing conversations and discussions and lend your voice. We are happy that you are here with us today, and we urge you to visit womenover70.com. Thank you.